what is going on with that scripture? Because the reason I ask is that apostle's the highest title I think that the Bible has to offer. And if there was a female apostle within the early church, this is obviously very different to what, you know, the tradition of the Catholic and Orthodox Church as time went on, which was dominated by men. But if there was, this has radical implications to how we view women and female leadership. So what's going on, Dr. White?
It was a woman.
It was a woman.
Look, okay. So
why, how about this? Why do people think it's a man?
So the word the name that's been used there is the Greek word is the word Junia. A-N is the important point, the last two letters, Junia. Now, what that denotes is that it's in the accusative tense of the noun, right? So because it's send greetings to somebody, and so it takes the accusative form in its spelling. So an is the accusative. Now, where that becomes a question is that the an, as an accusative, it doesn't indicate to us directly whether it's a masculine or a feminine noun, because there's no article there. If there's an article there, this wouldn't be a question, right? It would be a masculine or a feminine article, but we don't have that. All we have is the name. And so it's an accusative form, and you take it back, and it could either be a masculine or a feminine. So if it's a masculine, or if it's a feminine, that would logically be the name Junia, right? Just with an A. And so the an is picked up in the accusative form. If it's a man, it would have to be Junias, A-S. Now, so for it to be a masculine. Now, we don't know because we don't have the nominative form to work with. So Andronicus as well is in the accusative, and then so is this Junia. So that being the case, we have to ask ourselves, well, it's a proper name. So what names do we know in the masculine or the feminine that would be Junia or Junias? Well, the name Junia is one of the most common women's names in the Roman naming convention, right? It's as common as Rachel or Sarah, or, you know, just it's a standard name for women. In fact, when you look at inscriptions just from Rome, just from the city of Rome, we have 250 references to Junias just from Rome. Forget about the rest of the Roman Empire, just from Rome, 250 inscriptions. There is not a single instance of a man named Junius because it's not a name. It's just not a Roman name. Junius is not. Now, what you have to then argue is to say that...
Okay, sorry, I have to pause you right there. Okay, so this obviously is very important. So just to clarify for the audience, we have a large amount of evidence that supports Junia being a female name within the Greco-Roman world. Mm-hmm. Yes. But are we saying we have no evidence whatsoever?
It's not a name. There's none.
That's a little... I haven't heard that before. That's very intriguing. And so why would they think...
Because what they have to assume, and let's just work out what they assume there. So if it is masculine, it has to be Junias, but that isn't a real name. So the best that we can come up with is that Junias is a shortened version of Junicius. Now, Junicius would be a masculine name, but it's not a normal name. Junicius would be a slave's name. Now, what that would imply is that there is some guy named Junicius who used to be a slave to a woman named Junia. And so when you're a slave, you're free from your slavery, you adopt your former master's name. That becomes one of your...
Yeah, that seems to start being a little bit of a long bow
exactly.
there.
But that's the point. That's where it becomes so problematic to say that this is a man. The closest we can come is to say that this is a man who used to be a slave to a woman named Junia, has taken her name, a masculine form of the name Junia. That's the closest way we can get this Junian to be a man.
Okay, so I encounter a little bit of this dogmatic exegesis when I say, you know, taking a post-millennial stance on eschatology versus pre-millennial. You see certain things happen where you will change words and text, you'll bring in cultural context and all these things to draw a long bow. Now, have we done the same thing when we look at, 1 Timothy 2 or 1 Corinthians 14? I think what we've tried to do there is look at the cultural context within what Paul's already saying. So, are there any other examples in the Bible of Paul using a nickname in this type of context in any of his other epistles? Are there any examples of a name being mentioned where he could have adopted from a former slave or anything like that?
If there is, I don't know about them.
Okay. Yeah, neither do I.
But that's the point to say. If you have to insist that this is a man, because and now, okay, let's come. This is the argument we'll come back to in a moment. Why do you need it to be a man? Because you can't have it be a woman. Because if it's a woman, that means that there's a female apostle. That means that women in leadership is a thing. So you can't have that. So you have to make this to be a man. The only way you can do that is that you have to come up with a name that's as close as possible to Junias, which doesn't exist as a Roman man's name. Rather, it's an ex-slave's name.
And what was the name of that again?
Junicius. But then it's shortened to Junias to say in order for that to be a man. Because
okay, so is there any example of that anywhere else in the Bible?
There's no such thing. Not that I know of. There could be, but it's...
So, for example, just so we're clear, and because I know what sometimes the audience is like a little bit, not everyone, but, because you get controversial topic, you get criticized a little bit. When we have tried to draw links within the text, say like the Temple of Artemis, to explain the grief that they encounter, the 1 in 50 that are dying, we're trying to draw logical steps in the chain as to why someone said something. But I find that I find it difficult to stick with when Junia is short for Junicius, which is a nickname for
a name that's been made up.
Okay.
It's a name that's been made up,
and okay. Now, if that's the length, if that's the actual the argumentation to support a male name, that would obviously fit within the context of a male-dominated.
Well, that's the follow-up question to that is then why did it start being translated as a man? Because for the first 1,000 years of the church, they just took for granted that this is a woman. There was no question about it not being a woman because Junia is a woman's name. I say like it's like saying Rachel. Well, no, this Rachel that's been referred to can't possibly be a woman, so it must be some Racham. There's no such name as Racham. Well, that would be a more masculine name, so that's what it must have been. Like you're making up names because you have to have this to be a man.
Have you heard anything about? I thought I've maybe heard one argument about Junia it's a neuter ending. Is it a masculine?
No, it's an accusative ending. That's right, but it's a name. You can't. It's not going to be a neuter because it's referring to a male or a woman. So it has to use a masculine or a feminine case, a gender.
Does it have a gender, this word?
Of course it does.
And it's a female
because
gender,
it's referring to a proper name. All proper names have to have a masculine or a feminine gender because they're referring to males or females.
Okay.
Right. This is before 5 minutes ago when you can have 1,000 genders. This is when there was only back in the old days when there was only 2. So if you're going to call somebody by a name, it's going to be a masculine or a feminine gendered word because you're dealing with males and females. So there's not going to be a neuter name because you're not talking about an it. You're talking about a person.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
we've
going
got
to be
evidence in Greco-Roman world of having that name in wide use.
Yeah, exactly. So it's such a common name to give to Junia. It's just such a common name. There's no such thing as a man named Junias. So first of all, we don't have any evidence for there even being such thing as a Junias. But in order for you to make this to be a man, you have to make up a name. So for the first 1,000 years, nobody would even venture that sort of stupidity because, well, it's not a man. It can't be because this is a woman's name. And so they were perfectly fine with that. It's not until we get to the 11th or 12th century where medieval interpreters start saying, okay, well, we can't have a female apostle, so therefore this must be a man. So let's reshape the word. Let's move some accents around to make it a masculine term. What's the name going to be? It's going to be Junias rather than Junia. And so what you get from that point forward is it's a man because we can't have there be a female apostle. Okay. But for the first 1,000 years, you just take that for granted because of course there could be.
Okay, highly intriguing and very interesting. So thank you for clarifying that. That's really good.